are Sint Maarten. You are Sint Maarten.
The URSM, the Unified Resilient Sint Maarten Movement, being a political movement, will be hosting a weekly radio program called You Are Sint Maarten, every Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. on Radio Mix 94.7 FM. I myself, Dr. Messalina, the political leader of URSM, will be hosting this radio program in which current issues, actualities and general topics will be discussed with the people of Sint Maarten. So join us every Wednesday on Radio Mix 94.7 for our radio show You Are Sint Maarten.
You are Sint Maarten. You are Sint Maarten.
Dear people of Sint Maarten, good evening. Welcome to your radio program You Are Sint Maarten on Radio Mix 94.7 FM. As you know, this is a radio program that is being broadcasted every week from 6 to 7 p.m. on the Wednesdays, and it's an initiative of the political movement URSM, the Unified Resilient Sint Maarten Movement, and we are using the abbreviations of this political movement, and we decided to present on the basis of the abbreviations a radio program called You Are Sint Maarten, because in this way we believe we can include the people of Sint Maarten in the topics that we want to discuss with the people of Sint Maarten. I myself, Dr. Messalina, will be your host in this radio program. As you know, I'm the surgeon working in the Sint Maarten Medical Center since 1999, and I'm the political leader of the URSM since October 2020. We decided we're going to run with a new political movement because, as you know for yourself and experiencing, Sint Maarten is going through some challenging times, and we do not feel that the current government has a clue and a direction to where they have to move on with this country to help and alleviate the pains of the citizens of this country. We from the URSM do believe that we can make the difference for the nearby future, and that is also the reason that we will contest the upcoming parliamentary elections of country Sint Maarten. If it's for us, this election had to be yesterday, but unfortunately we have to wait and see. And I think there will come a moment that the people will realize that we cannot continue the way we are heading with the vision for this country. So I hope the people will wake up and make the right decision. In the first place, make use of their democratic right to vote. And secondly, of course, to reevaluate how the past years has been, to realize where the people of Sint Maarten are today, and think twice before making use of their voting right to make the right decision to prosper this beautiful country in the nearby future. I do believe, and the URSM of course with me, that we have to put the people and the country above self. Everything we do, every time again, as decisions for the country. If it's for the URSM, the first thing is we have to put the people and the country above self in every decision making for the nearby future for country Sint Maarten. And we believe, of course, in educating and informing the people of Sint Maarten. We strongly believe, of course, that there should be a sound balance between economic growth and the welfare of our society. As you know, we are presenting a weekly program in which current topics, community developments and issues, and general matters concerning our people in Sint Maarten are discussed. And for example, today there are a lot of hot topics going on in our community these days, and I thought it would be great for me to invite a sparring partner in this movement, Mr. Chris Wever, to be with me in this program. And going on, we will discuss some hot issues, hot topics that are keeping the people of Sint Maarten busy and actually makes our country very worrisome. Mr. Chris Wever, good evening. Nice to have you here as an invitee in I have to say, our program.
Good evening, Dr. Mercelina, and thank you, and good evening to the listening public. And I appreciate the invite, of course, and there's so much going on these days that it's hard to keep track and to pinpoint what exactly is the main issue, but there's so many issues, and I think you hit the nail on the head in your introduction when you mentioned about putting the people first, and there's no vision, and what's lacking within this government at the moment. And I think it will be an interesting dialogue today to see what's going on, our views, and you mentioned as well to wake up the people, and I think the people are waking up slowly right now. I can see it, I can hear it from the public. They are crying out, but they also are aware of the tactics that have been played and continue to be played to try to deceive the public, So thank you.
You're welcome. As you know, of course, I didn't introduce Mr. Chris Wever because I'm assuming that everybody knows Mrs. Chris Wever. For those that doesn't know him, he has been recently in our former government. He has been the Minister of Vrooming for a short while, but he has proven already in the short term that he was there that he is a very competent man. And unfortunately, his time span was very short, and then the new elections came. But okay, we have a new chance. It's going to be a different ball game again, Chris, and I hope that the people, as you said, will wake up. But actually, to tell you honest, Chris, I'm feeling it and I'm experiencing it on the way people discuss matters on the street. As a doctor, of course, I meet a lot of people on a daily basis, and people are really, really very aware of the crying situation that the society is in now. So I do believe that there is a wakening up of our people, and I'm very, very, very glad to see that. And gradually, as time is going, and seeing the productivity or the poor productivity of this government, I do believe that the populace of Sint Maarten has no option than to reconsider on the day of election and put the mandate to improve this country in the hands of experienced but knowledgeable people that can make the difference to change our Sint Maarten in a positive way.
Yes.
Great. Yes, you agree with me, right, Chris?
I agree fully with you, Doc.
Yes.
And, there were certain hot topics which occurred over the past few weeks.
Yes.
I think I did speak out about it on social media as well, and the feedback there really cemented the idea of the people waking up, and realizing what is happening. For instance, they had the job mixer that took place not too recently with 2 ministries involved, and I had a few questions asking there is why not the whole government apparatus? And then what stood out as well, what made me actually write a little article was that just when that came out, the advertisement, I got a notice from the government official website about job opportunities. And when I looked at it, they had about maybe 5 job opportunities, openings. But the job mixer advertised 18. So there you already see there's no cohesion within the government apparatus at the moment. And it seems to be going, every person is on an island for themselves. And even in my article, they had persons from the HR department, from P&O department, from government, who stated that they were not aware of the job mixer or they weren't involved in it. So that is definitely alarming when I go out on the road and people say that, Mr. Wever, what you mentioned is totally on point, and these are the questions that need to be asked. And then who is accountable for these things?
Yep.
Because later on you get also the information, the feedback that 300 plus persons apply or were there at the job mixer, but how many actually were qualified? And also, have we addressed the whole issue when it comes to hiring process of the duration it takes before somebody gets hired? Was it also something where somebody from within the government apparatus internally could apply for the job to kind of promote themselves in that situation, especially right now, what's going on with the whole 12.5% cuts that we're facing?
Yep. Now, Chris, for example, this morning I woke up in the newspaper of today. On the front page, you had an article that disclosed that the Curaçao Prime Minister, Mrs. Pisas, disclosed ultimately, for Sint Maarten, by the way,
Yes.
the 8 conditions applicable for Sint Maarten while we have our own Prime Minister. And what you see now is that a Prime Minister of a other country in the kingdom now is disclosing conditions for a other country in the kingdom. So I'm asking myself, where is our leadership? But anyway, thank God for the Prime Minister of Curaçao. Today we know what the conditions are in our country, Sint Maarten.
Yes.
First of all, Mr. Chris, I wanted first to analyze this whole thing about the conditions that actually started with liquidity support induced by the pandemic. Actually, going on, this coho came, and actually it is a little related to the setup of the coho. But I realized that we are making, or actually the government, the current government of Sint Maarten is making a huge mistake with the negotiations with the Netherlands concerning the coho. And I will explain you why, Chris. First of all, they are negotiating the coho with actually one party being under the umbrella of actually the Netherlands Antilles being Curaçao, Sint Maarten and Aruba together. And actually every time again you see that at the end of the day there cannot be a uniformity in approach to solve the individual situation of each island, but applying a general rule that can be applicable for all individual islands. If you want to do something for Curaçao, please negotiate with Curaçao, with the Parliament of Curaçao, with the Prime Minister of Curaçao, and do your thing, as we say. If you want to propose measures that can improve the livelihood of Sint Maarten, whatever it may be, please don't include Curaçao in this, because Sint Maarten is not Curaçao and Curaçao is not Sint Maarten. So if we have our own socio-economic challenges, you cannot just like that come with a uniform approach to think that you can, with one uniformity, cover all the issues of Sint Maarten and Curaçao with one regulation and one policy. That is not possible.
And Doc, not to cut you cross on that, but we've seen this happen already.
Many times.
When the 12.5% was introduced, it was stated that Aruba is the one that brought it to the table.
Of course.
Because it works for them.
Yes.
Now, because we're falling behind again, now we have to accept it. And we know now that the 12.5 doesn't work for us.
That's why many times already I said the Prime Minister of Sint Maarten must fight for the interest of Sint Maarten and don't hide behind the approach technique of Aruba or Curaçao. My Prime Minister, my Parliament has to do their own approach to try to solve the challenges in my community. For example, the coho, they were waiting on what the position was from Aruba and Curaçao, and then all of a sudden they came up with a common idea about that. Yes. Now you see that Curaçao came with a stance on the 12.5%, and all of a sudden now Sint Maarten goes to Curaçao to get an alliance to tackle this discussion with the Netherlands concerning. I do believe that shows the weakness of this government. It shows the lack of leadership, lack of courage to dare approach on a a authentical way for country Sint Maarten, the way you want to solve the problems of your country Sint Maarten. As I've said many times, never mind Aruba, never mind Curaçao, because the socioeconomic condition of Sint Maarten is completely different than the socioeconomic situation of Curaçao. For example, alone, Sint Maarten is in the hurricane belt. If tomorrow Sint Maarten encounters a hurricane disaster, we are completely out of balance with all the ideas that we have for this country, and we cannot continue applying the same rules that actually should work for Curaçao and Aruba, because we are here in a completely different situation. Another thing, for example, Chris, is also, for example, the whole economy of the Windward Islands is completely different than from the Curaçao and Aruba. Historically, I always understood there was a bovenwindentoeslag.
Yes.
Why? Because the bovenwinden is more expensive than the benedenwindse eilanden, the other three countries being in the past, Curaçao, Aruba, and Bonaire. But anyway, so there is such structural difference between the Windward Islands, like Sint Maarten, compared to Curaçao and Aruba, that you cannot apply a common rule for this coho. But coming back, for example, now to this coho thing that we are discussing, that actually this 12.5% is a derivative of this coho. First of all, this coho has been implemented for the following. The idea of this coho was to improve the public administration of country Sint Maarten. But the whole idea is, Chris, bottom line, we are not understanding what we are doing, because at the end of the day, it's about finance that we do not have here to manage this country in a socio-economic acceptable way.
Yeah.
So we have to take measures to improve the livelihood of people. Chris, let me tell you something. If you want to improve the livelihood of the people of a country, it costs you money. Okay. You have to explain me now, for example, by improving the public administration as such, that I think is going to cost more money to restructure the public administration. At the long term, what is the share to improve the livelihood of the people of Sint Maarten? Secondly, the coho has an intention to improve the finance of the country. How are you going to improve the finance of the country? You want to cut the 12.5%. You want to have a introduction of a fair taxation system to tax the people more, because you need revenues. But where do you going to get the revenues now in a sound way to invest to improve the livelihood of the people? I do not believe by implementing 12.5% by the public service and the semi-public departments that you are going to have enough revenues to improve the livelihood.
And I don't think you should punish the people that are compliant or that have been compliant within the tax system. You're now trying to get from them the extra revenues to kind of balance out the persons that have not been paying or have not been contributing to the tax system. So there also you're trying to now get money, but out of the same pockets from the same persons that are already struggling in this country.
Of course,
you know?
Chris. But Chris, at the end of the day, it's about improving the revenues of the country. Well, we are talking about a mono-pillar economy of this country, being tourism. We are seeing that pillar is being exhausted now, because that is the only one we have. Well, if you are the prime minister of a country, you're going to tell the Netherlands, listen, we want to increase the revenues of the country, but we cannot suffocate the people more.
Agree.
So another way to increase revenue is, instead of suffocating the people with this 12.5% an increase of tax, you can tell Holland, you know what, come now with some proposals that we are going to invest in policies and projects to improve and diversify the economy of the country. Everything that has been recommended by the Netherlands now through this coho and country packages are measures that are not going to contribute to a diversification of the economy for increase of revenues to help us develop this country.
Yes.
All measure that has been proposed in the COHO, if you are very critical about them, they are those that's going to cost money. For example, public administration has to be improved, but it costs you money to improve your public administration, but it's not going to increase your revenues of your country to help develop the society. Another one is, for example, the making the finance of the country resilient. How are you going to make the resiliency of finance possible if you don't work on diversification of your economy and increase of revenues for your country? And everybody is negotiating constantly with the Netherlands, with the kingdom government, about a way of oppressing the people, making them more poor than they are, while these same people, if they had a good intention to see prosperity and great development for country Sint Maarten, the Dutch can also come with proposals and visions and projects that they like to co-invest in with us, for us to diversify our economy and in that way increase the revenue of our
And you said it there, Doc, when you speak
finance.
about vision.
Vision.
When we, our leaders, don't know what we want for our country, it's difficult now to go on the table and negotiate.
Yeah.
Where do we want to see our country in the next 10 years, 5 years? So what we do, we sit back and we follow what Curacao wants to do, or Aruba wants to do, or even the Netherlands. And then they put a paper in front of you. And then, and then we have to go ahead with it because there's no alternative solution to it. We even hear a lot about debt cancellation. And I think I can give you my opinion on it, and I would like to hear your opinion in the second half of this program. But when you speak about debt cancellation, this is just my view on it. You go back to zero, but then you still need funds to start. So where are we going to get that funds from? If it's not the Netherlands, it will be another country, and then we'll end up being in the same cycle that we started right now. So I guess when we return from the second half, then we can go a little bit into that.
Of course. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a very interesting discussion concerning how Sint Maarten is moving at this particular moment. Unfortunately, time is running fast on us. I propose for us to take a small break, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Dear people of Sint Maarten, welcome to the second half of our radio program, You Are Sint Maarten. As you know, we have today with us as an invitee Mr. Chris Wever. Chris Wever is actually my partner in our political movement, You Are Sint Maarten. Mr. Chris Wever has had recently an experience also as the Minister of Romy for a short period before election came. So of course we have somebody already with us that has a experience in government. And because of the current issues and problems going on in Sint Maarten, I decided to have Mr. Chris Wever today with us in this radio program to discuss a few issues going on in this country. And in the first half, of course, at the end of the first half, Chris asked me, for example, about my opinion about the debt cancellation for country Sint Maarten, as if that is going to be the solution for the financial crisis of country Sint Maarten. Chris, I can be very short in answering this question. I do not believe that debt cancellation is going to prosper Sint Maarten as of now, and I will tell you why. Because even if I have this debt cancellation, I still do not have a revenue and enough funds to govern in a responsible way this government. So of course it's going to help because a share of our revenues are going to paying back our debts, and of course it will help a little, but our socio-economic problems in this country are now so enormous that I do believe that debt cancellation is not the ultimate solution to help us out of our crisis.
And I think that is also something which sets up sets us apart from the rest is that we hear about it in Parliament, where parliamentarians speak about debt cancellation, but it ends there. The conversation ends there. They don't come with solution-based. And I think URSM is mainly built on solution-based. And when we see issues, we would want to see how can we solve these issues and what our vision is and how do we see the country moving forward from that. And I think it's one thing, and it's easy to criticize anything you do, but you also have to come with the other side of the coin, where you see an issue, but okay, how are we going to address this issue? And I think that is what stands us apart from the rest.
Of course. But Chris, coming back to, for example, the debt cancellation as a action to cancel that to help us, okay? Another one is, for example, this whole discussion about this 12.5%. Okay. I have my opinion about that too, and it is the following. In the time of the post-Irma phase already, and then following the pandemic, the only thing that happened with country Sint Maarten is that it boosted the unemployment of this country. Bon. That means that you have more unemployment, and that means that a lot of people lost their job. They do not have an income. But you still have a local economy that you have to maintain to keep things going in this country. And I've always said, and I will repeat it today, that 12.5% that they want to implement on the civil servants and also those in the semi-public sector, it's going to weaken the income of the only group of people that has a stable income to buy something in the local economy. So imagine if we are going to now shrink the income of those that have a stable income, that has some income to step off next to the road, buy a Coke, buy a Johnny Cake, do something extra for those that are trying to survive by selling something on the side of the street. If you are going to shrink their income, put more pressure on their income, they will not be anymore in a position that they can buy things in our local economy. So they are going to be also very critical in the way they're going to give out their money. And that means that in that way you're going to weaken even more the local closed economy of Sint Maarten. And that's why I do not believe in lowering the salaries as a solution to prosper this country. No, it's not going to work that way. And someone will have to explain the Netherlands that by implementing this 12.5%, you're going to weaken more the local closed economy of Sint Maarten. You're going to increase the poverty of the country, and poverty is going to work against development of a country. The higher your poverty rate, the more difficult it becomes for you to develop your country. That is a known fact.
And two things on that, Doc. Besides the economic effect of the 12.5%, you have the morality as well within the government apparatus as well, where now the production goes lower because now I'm doing the same work but not getting the same pay that I was doing for the same work.
Yes.
So why would I now invest more of myself within a company that doesn't seem to value my worth in that sense? So it's going to have a ripple effect on that. And when we talk about how you say about the poverty level, with poverty, crime increases as well. And we've seen it on the news various amounts of time, unfortunately, that we see burglaries and more people getting robbed than before. Because at the end of the day, what is their mindset? Why are they now, why are they reaching that point where they now have to go and rob somebody for a $10 or whatever it is that they find to survive another day, if that's even the case, you know? So we have to, there's a lot of correlation between, and persons look at the 12.5%, it's like, okay, but it's only this aspect of it. No, it has a whole ripple effect,
Yep.
and it creates a whole instability within different sectors in our society.
Yes. But Chris, let's go, for example, pay some attention to the article that was published today in our morning newspaper in Sint Maarten.
From the Prime Minister of Curaçao.
From Prime Minister of Curaçao.
Yes,
Unfortunately, because I would like to see this being communicated with the people of Sint Maarten by our Prime Minister. And you see that we are listening about 3 of the 8 conditions by our Prime Minister, and one of the other way, there is no transparency to communicate the people's business with the people of the country. But anyway, let's start going through those 8 conditions, Chris, and let's stand still by them and see what it's all about. The first condition, according to this article, is that the national ordinance for the standardization of top incomes must have entered into force. Okay, as I told you, whatever that standardization may be, I do not believe that you should cut the income of those with a steady, stable income at this particular moment of the crisis, whatever their income is, because you are going to break their buying power. And we are now depending on the buying power of those that have a stable income to keep the local closed economy of Sint Maarten going.
Yep.
So I do not believe that is going to help the country. But anyway.
I agree with you, Doc, and I think we just touched it earlier as well.
Yes.
And the effects of that.
Let's go to the second condition that I read in the newspaper. Thank God to the Prime Minister of Curaçao. And the second condition is that there must be money in the budget to be able to finance the removal of the 12.5%, since the costs cannot be paid from liquidity support provided by the Netherlands. Okay, Chris, in the beginning we discussed the budget of the balance of our budget, in the sense that the 12.5% has been proposed by the Dutch.
Yep.
Okay, so we have now 2 challenges. On the one side, we do not have enough revenues to guarantee the continuity of payment, not to touch this 12.5% deduction for our civil servants. But on the other side, the Netherlands is telling us, you know what? We are proposing 12.5, and if you want, you can deviate from it, but make sure you pay it yourself. Okay. Because I'm a country in the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and because I'm in a crisis, I think it's unfair for the Netherlands, knowing better that they are obliging us to take the whole responsibility to guarantee continuity of payment to the civil servant in crisis times that we are now encountering. That is not correct. And they know that in advance.
And the 12.5% would end up also increasing our revenue.
Yes.
If they do pay it.
If they pay it. Yeah. Because if you deduct it, it's going to deduct also the loonbelasting. And then on the other side, you're going to lose. you deduct the income, but then you have to deduct the tax payment too. So you lose the tax income, the revenue on the other side, because you cannot tax them more because they're owing less. So I do not understand. And to tell you, Chris, I'm not an economist. I'm a doctor, but I do not feel I have to be an economist to understand this. Let's go for the third condition. The third condition is that the focus for abolishing the 12.5% must be on those with a low income. You have to explain me that, Chris, how that works. Because how are you going to focus on deducting 12.5% by those that can have the buying power to help those with less possibility to make some money in community? You're going to break that group that can help the poor section of the community. Yeah. And how can you focus on the poor people while you're breaking those that can spend money to help the poor ones? So you have to You have to be logical in your approach to solve problems.
And by doing
I
this,
don't get it.
By doing this as well, the middle class is slowly shrinking, and we'll see it. The more this continues to happen, that there will be a big separation between low income and the high income earners, where the middle class, which is actually the middle class, is what drives any country. You'll break them.
Of course, of course. Let's go now for the fourth condition, Chris. The fourth condition is if there is sufficient room in the budget to eliminate the 12.5% regulation and there are no other unexpected developments, then Article 25 of the Financial Supervision Act, Rijksfinancieel Toezicht, as they call it, can no longer be invoked. This article is about damage caused by extraordinary events as a result of which the Kingdom Council of Ministers can agree to a deviation from the budget norm. That means what the Netherlands are telling us is, guys, the moment that you think that 12.5% is not necessary anymore, you have to make sure that then at that particular moment you cannot count on the Netherlands as a partner in the Kingdom of the Netherlands in crisis time. And I do believe the crisis time started for us since Hurricane Irma and Maria, and we are still in a dip of a crisis, additionally empowered actually by the pandemic.
In this condition as well, we're already at a disadvantage here because we're in the hurricane belt. Hurricane season started now. We're in June. Aruba and Curacao are not so much affected when it comes to
no expenses.
hurricanes.
We have a lot of expenses coming to prepare for the hurricane.
So the odds that we would be tapping into this is higher than Curacao or Aruba.
Of course. Anyway, Chris, let's go now for the fifth one that we got from the Prime Minister from Curacao. The fifth condition is that the B5 measure in the national package, as they call it, the country package of the COHO, which aims to reduce the government's total wage bill, must be implemented quickly. Actually, what they're proposing us to do is to take measures that is only going to squeeze the people, but on the other side, they are not investing in projects and investments to diversify, as I said, the economy of the country for us to increase our revenues to balance our budget. The COHO presentation, the way it is now, is never going to be able to balance our budget in a responsible way because there is no diversification of our economy. But okay, we're going now to point 6. The sixth condition stipulates that the 25% discount on the salary of ministers and members of parliament should be maintained. I mean, yes, it's a whole discussion, but okay, they can have this one because we have decided that we're going with that already. The seventh condition is that after the abolition of the 12.5% regulation, the salaries of civil servants may not exceed the wages of ministers or members of parliament with a pledge of 25% or more. You know, Chris, of course, the salaries are good salaries of ministers and members of parliament. If you compare to others, the bigger percentage of the community, there is a discrepancy, of course. I realize that too. But even if you're going to deduct 25% of the salary of 15 members of parliament, I'm going to keep it very simple because I'm a surgeon, so I'm not I'm not an economist, I'm a simple guy. If you add 15 times 2,000 guilders to this policy, you're going to save 15 times, for example, 2,000 guilders is going to be 30,000 guilders. 30 guilders. You really think you're going to solve your financial problem of your country with 30,000 guilders. That is about 13,000 euros. 13 euros, 13,000 euros. The government of the Netherlands thinks that with 13,000 euros we're going to save and solve the financial crisis of country Sint Maarten. I think we have to start thinking out of the box if we want to think big to solve the big problems of this country. Big problems deserve big thoughts to get to big solutions. And staying on that 25% for members of parliament is as such symbolically of course a contribution,
Yes.
but in reality
It's
it's
not gonna
about
make a
13
difference. Yeah.
13,000 euros. I really don't see how 13,000 euros is going to help the nation in its deplorable financial situation that it's in. And the final condition, Chris, stipulates that the removal of the 12.5% can only take place after a decision has been made by the Kingdom Council of Ministers, after it has been informed by the CFT that the island meets all the other conditions.
And I
What
think that's
does that mean?
important. They say all the other conditions.
All the other conditions. So if you read carefully what we cannot in this country, because there's a lot of documents passing on our desk every day, but I have the impression that we are, as those governing this country, we are not reading and understanding the message of the documents coming from the Kingdom Council of Ministers, our direction. And you see in this way that actually that CFT is not advising, but whatever the CFT says will be copy-pasted by the Kingdom Council of Ministers. And actually, whatever the CFT says will be the end decision of the Kingdom Council of Ministers. I do believe it's time for serious people of all representatives of the countries in the kingdom, in this case the ones in Sint Maarten and those of the Netherlands, to sit as adults and really out of a good heart and a good intention try to solve the financial problems of this country instead of relying on the 25% cut of 15 members of parliament, as if that is going to solve the big financial crisis of country Sint Maarten. I don't know what you think, Chris.
But if we don't bring anything to the table, we're already at a disadvantage. And I think it's so important. And that's why I so agree with the stance of the movement when it comes to the Soho. Because even when you look at the conditions, it's not really in proportion to other countries.
No.
Some benefit more from certain things and others benefit from others, where we need to really approach it based on what works for St. Maarten on a whole.
Of course.
Because it says all conditions must be approved. So, but if we're at a disadvantage when it comes to one of the conditions, we're already behind.
Yes. Chris, from the URSM, we came with this Soho, and people do not understand actually what I meant with this Soho. The S stands for Sint Maarten. And I'm telling you, we need the H and the O in the Coho, and that is reform and development. There is no country in the world that does not want reform and development. It's logical that all of us want reform. And why do we want reform? To improve. We want to make it more efficient. We want to make it better for everybody. So a country needs constantly reform, and a country needs constantly development. But what we must be careful with is the CO, and that is the Caribbean. And I told you already, Chris, we have to disconnect from the sea, because the sea represents Aruba, Curaçao, and Sint Maarten, and it has to be a Sint Maarten entity for reform and development. Next to that, this S must not come from the Netherlands. This S has to come for our own people. We are here in the condition that we are today because of lack of vision, because of lack of sound action to improve our country. So what we are doing now is waiting to see what proposals the Dutch are bringing for us to improve our country. It should be that we should have our own Sint Maarten entity for reform and development, and it has to be registered by our own players in our own country with a good intention, with a good heart, and always putting the country and the people above self. That is the message for this whole coho discussion. We need reform, we need development, and we need to do it ourselves. We must not be passive, wait until the Netherlands brings proposal, and then we start fighting with them because they are coming with condition with our proposal. I say, guys, are you unhappy with that? Bring your own initiative, bring your own solution, bring your own proposals, and then there is no need to have no discussion with the Dutch. And I want to go a step further with you, Chris. If we have well thought of projects that is going significantly to contribute to prosperity of country Sint Maarten, I want to see the first Dutch representative that is not going to cooperate with me to improve the prosperity of this country. I challenge them, and I do believe the URSM will have the package to propose to the Netherlands in a totally different approach for them to also realize that we are going to take the responsibility for our own country. And Chris, I'm going to give you the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Marcelino.
Before we finish.
Yes. Very interesting conversation today, and I think it's so important to have it, and I think this platform is one of the many ways and many tools that we are using to get a different point of view across and different solutions. And it starts with transparency. If we look at the discussions that we had today when it comes to the 8 conditions which we received from the Prime Minister from Curaçao, to me it doesn't seem like anything there couldn't have been shared with our people.
Of course.
You know, and it's not to say, even if we're still talking and negotiating in it, once it's known, let's at least tell the people, look, this is what's on the table. These are exactly the conditions that's being tabled. And let's see what we agree with, what we don't agree with. It's not the final draft, but it's something that we're busy with. But at least that you know where we're starting.
Yes,
you know?
of course.
But to say, okay, I'm just going to give you 3 out of the 5, and then say, yeah, but I was the first Prime Minister to make the conditions known, you know, it's still, it does something to the trust of this nation. And I think the trust is at a high level right now, that the distrust for this government that these people have. And it starts with these kind of simple things, because if you look at the 8 conditions, as I said just now, it's nothing to say that had to been hidden. And I think by discussing this, hopefully now, thankfully, the Prime Minister from Curaçao spoke out about it, that we can actually have a discussion as a nation and, okay, where do we see ourselves? And it allowed us now, as well as a movement, to put our kind of opinion on it and to see how we would now adjust to it.
Chris, to add to what you're saying, that I completely agree with, is if we had a competent government that was really doing what they had to do for the country, we would have never ended up in this negotiating conditions from the Dutch. Because if we are doing and assuming our responsibility and really do what we have to do, and every time again putting the country and the people above self, we would have never ended up in the situation that we are in now. And instead of thinking and rethinking a way to solve our problem now, we are fighting now with proposals and conditions from the Netherlands, instead of pulling up our socks and do what we have to do with our country, Sint Maarten. Chris, I want to thank you for your costly time that you took out to be together with us today in this radio program. As once more, it was a very interesting discussion today that we had concerning the hot topic of the conditions for the liquidity support from the Netherlands. Chris, I want to thank you for being here with us in this radio program. Listeners, once more, thank you too for being with us in this radio program. We are looking forward to be with you again next week, Wednesday, from 6 to 7 p.m. in our radio program, You Are Sint Maarten, on the Radio Mix 94.7 FM. Have a great night.